Hello, and welcome to a Season 1 episode of Beyond Teaching, a new series featured on the PsychSessions network. This series is hosted by Susan Nolan from Seton Hall University, Adelinka Akinseler-Smith from City College of New York, City University of New York, Asani Sewell from Pacific University, and yours truly, Eric Landrum from Boise State University. Through informal discussions and email exchanges, what we discovered and agreed upon is that to be a successful academic or professional, it takes more than teaching, research, or clinical skills. That is, today's psychology professionals were not taught everything they need to know in graduate school. How do you find a mentor in your career path? And what do you do if that mentoring relationship turns sour? What are the strategies for dealing with Zoom fatigue, both for you and your students? How do you learn to say no, whether that is for a job offer, a student's letter of recommendation request, or a potential committee assignment? How do you choose what journal to submit your work to, and how do you deal with cranky reviewers? These topics and more are discussed in the Season 1 episodes that are now being released spring and summer of 2021. In future seasons, we'll be inviting guest experts to join us, and we have a host of topics to discuss regarding areas of our jobs that no one ever prepared us for. Now, I don't mean that to sound cranky or anything, but there really is a lot that no one ever told us, right? And so that's what this podcast is all about, taking us beyond teaching. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Teaching. We're delighted to be all together here, what I'm going to call the Core Four. The Beatles didn't always record together, but today the Core Four were back together. Hello, friends.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
So one of you, and it wasn't me, I'm not going to take credit for it, came up with a great topic for today. Will you tell our listeners about it?
Go ahead, Yinka.
Oh.
So
today we're going to be talking about saying no to job offers that you might have received. You know, what goes into making that decision as much as you've applied for the job and you've been offered it now. Can you walk away? And if you choose to, how do you walk away?
And you're talking even more specifically about the situation in which that's your offer, right? That it's not like you've got 3 offers and you're picking which one and saying no, but the situation where you have an offer and it's that, or at the moment, nothing.
Yeah.
So the scenario matters. So you've got one offer, you're not waiting for anything else to come in. You've got one offer, you've heard from all your other schools. You don't have a job set up for next semester, next year. Your grad school is done or your postdoc is done, whatever. You've got one and only one, and now you're on a yes-no decision fence. Is that pretty much the scenario?
Mm-hmm.
I think there can be a happy medium too, though. I think you can be waiting and just not have anything else yet, because we all know the academic job market. It's not, oh yeah, something else is going to happen.
But the immediate future is the school or the clinic or the corporation needs a decision, let's say, in a week.
Yes. And you won't have anything else by then.
You don't think you'll have anything else within the next 7 days.
Yes.
So you have to make a yes, no, not knowing, with an uncertain future beyond that. That's the scenario we're setting up for the cognitive psychologists out there.
My heart's fluttering a little bit here just listening to this, because I'm like, ooh, boy, that's a scary situation. I think I've been in that place before. I don't want to do the mic drop one word answer about what is required for this, but I think just courage, isn't it? You need to have a little bit of courage to be able to say, no, this is not the right fit for me. And I'm going to step out into that great unknown, trying to be true to myself. So I think that's one ingredient, really, is a degree of courage.
And really knowing your own goals. I had a situation like this when I went on the job market in the beginning, when I ended up at Seton Hall, because there was another place that was moving a lot faster. And I did the phone interviews, and I won't say where it is for obvious reasons in a second, but I was interested in doing research and teaching. And when I asked about what was required to get tenure at that institution, they said, grant this, research that, blah, 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 and just don't be a horrible teacher. That was a direct quote. I've never forgotten it. And so then I was invited to be one of the finalists, and nothing else was quite there yet. And I didn't know what would happen. And I declined the on-campus interview because I did not want to be at a place that simply being not a horrible teacher, it told me how they valued instruction in the classroom. And it was scary. It was really scary. And for me, it worked out wonderfully because I did end up getting an offer eventually. But you don't know that at the moment when you say no. And it's, what have I just done?
Yeah, I think for me, I've had a similar experience, but I think what also came into play was where I was and what I wanted to do in my career at that point in time. So I had the situation where I had a job offer in academia, but then, and I was toying with that, but then the opportunity came for me to take a clinical position. And at that time, I thought I could work out this academia thing, but then I really wanted that clinical position. And so I wound up at that point in time making the decision to walk away from that, to say, no, thank you very much, and go with the clinical thing. But then many moons later on, while I was doing my clinical work, another academic position popped up. And I was ready at that point. And it was like the stars aligned, and I was able to negotiate with my clinical position to keep some time there. And so it made the decision making process much easier.
Yeah. So what we have here, Susan and Yinka, what you're describing are two very happy endings in a way. Even though it was tense in the moment, it sounds like ultimately you landed at exactly where you were supposed to. And I think for you, Yinka, as you're describing, another opportunity arose. And so I think that's one of the gifts of saying no. When you say no, that's really true to yourself, is that you open up other opportunities that might be better fits for the future. And I think though, too, with the saying no is around these job offers, opportunities, things like that you could do it at different moments. So Yinka, you were highlighting that you got the actual offer and then you said no then. And then Susan, I think in your scenario, you were offering that you were a finalist, and before you got the offer, it sounded like you said no. So the no can occur at any moment, but I think in all these different scenarios, it is really about coming back to the truth of who you are and what you want. So you have to know that going in, right? Or along the way.
Yeah. And I also think in my case, I asked myself if the only way to be in academia is to work at a place where there's not a balance between research and teaching, do you want to be in academia? And that's the question I asked myself. And because I knew that it's not a guarantee by any stretch. And I was comfortable saying no, knowing that I might not end up in academia.
Mm-hmm. Susan, hadn't you already by that time in your life worked your way over to Paris and then worked your way back independently?
That was before grad school.
Yeah. So you already had the self-confidence that if you said no to this offer, you were going to be okay.
I could go teach English in Paris again, right?
Yeah. So I think Asani's onto something here, but I think our two guests who have described their own personal experiences, which is really awesome that you shared that. The two of you, whether you knew it or not at the time, or whether you said it out loud, you were either superstars or you were developing superstars. You had a lot of talent. And I think for some of our students, or maybe I should just say for someone like me, I'm not so sure I would have had the guts to say no to that one and only one thing. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not so sure at any point in the last 32 years of my teaching, I could have left higher ed. What would I have done? Yeah, I tell myself, oh, I've got a skill set. I could go into consulting. But really? Do I really want to work that hard? Do I really want to work 80, 90-hour weeks and not have control over my life? So I think that ability to say no, which I greatly admire in the two stories that you just shared, is really hard to do, especially when you don't know the outcome of a future. And maybe it's easier to do when you're young and you don't have a family and you don't have a mortgage and you don't have a husband or a wife or a significant other.
Yes, I agree completely. I think it is much easier to do when you don't have mortgage, children, et cetera.
Whatever,
and
yeah.
I had lots of student loans, but I think that if we're talking about what we might have people think about if you're in this position. I have seen a lot of people, friends, colleagues opt out of academia entirely at different points and end up doing a wide range of really fascinating things, whether it's NGO work or working with different organizations overseas or going, I'm not from psychology, but from other fields into translation, going to work for corporations too, or going into consulting too. But I've seen such a wide range. And I think that there's so much that's really exciting out there. And if you have a PhD in psychology, in the case of probably people listening today, that is such an increasingly, even more than when I was in grad school, an increasingly versatile degree, given the statistics and data visualization. That's such a big part of the doctorate. I think there's so much. So I don't think, unless you really are academia do or die, I think Asani's right. Just courage to not know what that's going to be.
I think remembering too that your no could be a no for now. When I'm thinking about Yinka's tale, for example, on her first opportunity, it was a no for now, because then when she rolled back around, that academic opportunity came up a little bit later. So sometimes your no is just no for now, not no for forever. And I think that can be really worthwhile too. And I've got a little hack that I use to find my courage when I'm really trying to weigh a decision and I'm like, I don't really know which way I should go. There's a yes, there's a no. Sometimes it's career opportunities, sometimes life things. I just think about my 80-year-old self, that would have lots of gray hair, not just the wisps that I have today. But what would the 80-year-old Asani say about this opportunity? Like looking back on her life, would she regret that that said no or yes to whatever this was? It seems like some things just fall away and what you really want becomes really clear. I think, Eric, to connect it to what you were just offering, a lot of times it really comes back to family. It really comes back to quality of life. It really comes back to joy and happiness. And then that becomes the path that I try to lean into a little bit.
So little gray, so much wisdom. I'm sorry, Yinka, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, even within academia, moving up the food chain, if you will, other opportunities coming up. You get your tenure and then you're sitting pretty, if you will, and then other opportunities come up. I had an opportunity come up to shift institutions. There are opportunities to rise within the administrative piece of academia. And again, thinking about who you are, what you do well in, challenges that you're ready to face, what your life circumstances are like will dictate that. Again, recently an opportunity came up where it was a no-brainer for me to say no, because I really have never enjoyed administrative work. But the other big thing was when I brought it up with my family in passing, my kids looked at me like I had 6 heads and were like, oh, we're not moving to the place. No, we like it right here in Harlem. Thank you very much. So, they get to have a say too. If they don't want to go, they're like, you go, you can come and visit us or something. So you have to take all of these things into consideration.
So if we go back to this scenario where you're offered this thing without anything as a backup, if you will, or any other contingencies in the wind that you know of, let me ask you all this. How much harm could there be in saying yes for now? Do our colleagues who end up hopping sometimes from visiting assistant professorships to visiting assistant professorships, do they end up doing any damage, some damage, a lot of damage when you see a 1 year, and then applying for an assistant professorship? Would they be better served if they had said no and maybe stayed where they were and looked to extend their stay as a additional postdoc or just do some teaching as an adjunct? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you're giving these alternatives, whereas not everybody might have the alternative to stay on
True.
a postdoc.
Absolutely true.
And having been on search committees, I actually value when someone has had a year or two as a visiting assistant professor, so you can get a better sense of what they think about that job and from their teaching philosophy, and obviously taking student evaluations with a giant grain of salt because they're problematic in so many ways, including sexist and racist. But you can also, see some feedback from their students just to get a sense of how they teach and how they might fit at your university. So I guess if you're saying like how many, at what point does it make it harder to get a tenure track job? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I guess I don't necessarily think there's a problem. I'm just guessing the bouncing around sometimes I've seen on search committees in my department, other departments on my campus can raise a red flag. So if someone has 4 years post PhD, been at 4 different 1-year appointments at different parts of the country, then that raises a red flag sometimes. First off, they don't say no, to connect it back to our topic. But secondly, wow, if we offer them an assistant professor tenure track, they're going to say yes to us, but are they really going to say yes to the tenure track? We're going to invest in them, hoping they're going to be our longtime faculty member.
Even if the others were visiting, Eric, because that's why they left.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, visiting, because I guess maybe I'm
I think if I were on a search committee with you, I would push back.
I guess I'm stereotyping. Why do you keep applying for visiting and only getting visiting 4 times in a row?
So that's the kind of person who you're thinking you wouldn't even offer an interview to?
No, I would offer an interview to, but I might have a red flag about, so give me some confidence that you're going to stay.
Well, I would hope that they would explain themselves in their
right.
letter of intent.
Mm-hmm. Or during the interview or something. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also, I know the academic job market is just so hard that there are like superb candidates that just through
very
happenstance miss out on the tenure track job for a few years and hopefully eventually get one if that's what they want. But
I'm not being very articulate. Maybe would it be better sometimes to say no to serial positions year over year?
And then what do you do? If you want to be in academia, what do you do then during that year that you don't have one of these?
I think it depends on what your goal is and what you're aiming for. And there's a story behind all those people who have that particular career trajectory. Maybe they're a trailing spouse, or maybe they're just all kinds of reasons why people their CVs might wind up looking like that.
Yeah. So I would, with something or someone like that, I would really encourage them to, as Asani's saying, reflect on what is going on and be able to articulate why. And if they ultimately would like to have a long-term stable position, have that and be able to articulate, this is why I've had to move this way, and this is what this is what my 80-year-old self would like to see.
There you go. Words. There you go.
One of us is closer to that 80-year-old self than the other 3. I think it's pretty obvious if you could see us, podcast listeners, on the screen. We don't have to go deeper into that.
It's about the age of our hearts.
According to the cardiologist, one of the 4 of us is still closer than
your
the other
spiritual
3.
Heart.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
But maybe we can end our conversation by getting back to Asani's wonderful advice about the 80-year-old self, which I am now going to adopt, because I think that mindset when making these decisions is a really helpful one.